So in this video, I'm doing something a little bit different than normal. Rather than doing a deep dive into a specific topic in public policy, I'm going to look at the broader picture of how all these videos fit together into one broad overview of public policy. Now, the two frameworks that I use most for understanding and sorting public policy are the policy cycle and the policy tools framework. Now, while both of these are widely used in the field of public policy, they are not the only ways to look at public policy. So, if you're studying this for a test or something like that, just note that it may not be the only answer to the question, but it's one that I find very useful and that I'll use throughout my work on this channel. So let's get right into it. Starting first with the policy cycle. So I did a full video on the policy cycle, which you can check out, but the Coles Note version is that there are 5 different stages in the policy cycle: agenda setting, policy formulation, decision, implementation, and then finally policy evaluation. Now, I've done 2 videos that touch on the first stage, the agenda setting phase. The first one was the Kingdon's 3 streams video, which is by far the most popular video on my channel. But I also did a second video looking at Dr. Stone's policy paradox, or her storytelling view of agenda setting. While all of this does fall in the domain of public policy, this stage is also very much the domain of political management and political psychology in terms of determining what gets on the agenda. The second stage, policy formulation, is really the primary domain of public policy. And in there, you'll find the policy tools framework, right? So this stage is all about coming up with what the options of what policy tools we can use are. So far, I've done a deep dive video on the introduction to taxation and understanding that there are 5 different effects of every taxes and some of what the considerations are. I also did a look at Pigouvian taxes, which is one specific type of tax. I've also done a few videos on the regulation policy tool, specifically asking what is good regulation and also looking at risk-based regulation. So again, this is the primary domain of public policy analysis, but also would include things like economics and law to understand what the impact of different policies could be. The third stage, the decision phase, is really one that is, I would say, more outside the realm of public policy and really the domain of political science and political theory. But I did do a few videos on this just to set the stage for it because it's so important to the policy formulation stage. So I did a video that looked at utilitarianism. I did one that looked at Rawlsian understanding of ethical decisions. And then I did one video that covers a few different conservative thinkers. Next, when we think about implementation, this is really the domain of public administration and the study of public administration. Oftentimes you'll see, different degrees that are public policy and administration, and it's because these two are so closely linked, but really implementation is the domain of public administration. In here, I've done one video thus far, which was actually one from my current literature series, which was looking at governability of the United States and China in the context of COVID-19. I also have a video coming up on new public management, which would fall under this stage of implementation, as it's really all about what's going on with the public service and the executive branch. Then finally, there's program evaluation, which I don't have any videos thus far on specifically, but the relevant sort of fields in this are economics, sociology, but also really any field would engage in policy evaluation. So for instance, education would evaluate the success or failure of different education programs. Environmental sciences would look at different environmental policies, etc. And so this is a bit more broad of a topic, but this is how things sort of fall in the different stages of the policy cycle. So you have agenda setting, which is again political management, political psychology in terms of determining what gets on the agenda. You have policy formulation, which is, again, mainly the focus of public policy, but would include things like economics and law. You have the decision, which is really political science, political theory. Implementation, really public administration. And then program evaluation, economic sociology, but also more broadly. But of course, sometimes we look at things across the policy cycle. So we'll take something and sort of follow it through the different stages. And so when we're doing that type of analysis, we are using a view of policy issues. And again, I've done a number of videos that touch on different policy issues. So I've done videos that look at public debt and decarbonization, again, from my current literature series. I've looked at different reasons to regulate. I've looked at unemployment insurance, and I did a couple videos looking at tariffs and protectionism and free trade, being sort of two sides of that debate. So those are videos that look at specific policy issues. I also have looked at different institutions. International institutions can play a big role in public policy. Again, they can help determine the agenda. They can have implications for what different policy options would lead to. They can help or hinder implementations. They can certainly impact how decisions are made, and they can do a lot of policy evaluation themselves. So they're really important in the field of public policy. And so far I've done 2 videos, one looking at the World Bank and one looking at the IMF. And there's one final group of videos that I think is really interesting and often overlooked, which is the idea of judicial policy making. And that can happen through a few different ways. First, sometimes judges in their decisions will require certain actions from government, and so that is directly making a policy decision. But also sometimes how legislation is written or how constitutions are written can influence which public policy choices are made. And so I have one video that I would put in this category, which is when I did a deeper dive on cruel and unusual punishment. But there's certainly a swath of videos that I could do falling into this bucket. So that's a very, very quick overview of how my videos fit into one sort of big picture of public policy. So if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see my future videos and figure out how they fit into this big picture, I encourage you to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.